I know, you do a great job. It's been forever since I've used those.
So we want to switch to your table or to the podium or just nothing
Table
else?
4.
The table.
Yeah, I'm looking for 4. Thank you.
I got for some reason. I asked it to throw something out here.
Yeah.
There's only one remote, unfortunately.
That's what I know you mentioned before. Did you
Yeah, I mean, if you want to get up and you can file, I have a remote too.
Yeah, if you'll just
Did you ever see the joint motion process? Here's that. Yeah, our witnesses is in the joint order of get back in.
Okay, you can hear it?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you know what you want to use? So sad.
Sure. Joanna. Sure, I am. Joanna. And Joanna. Hi. Shelley. Kathy, I would introduce myself. Oh, that's right. Oh, God. Joanna. Awesome.
Shelley, if you have questions, talk to her.
Oh,
Not us.
definitely. She's in the know.
Oh, Elliot, please. There it is.
All rise.
Be seated.
Ready, Your Honor? Mr. Hine, please pull up Exhibit 13, starting at timestamp 14:13:30. Officer Hodges, do you see the video on your screen?
I do.
Is this your body camera footage from January 6, 2021?
It is.
Did you review this footage prior to your testimony today?
I did. It
Does the footage fairly and accurately depict what you witnessed on January 6, 2021?
does.
Mr. Hain, please play the video. And we're pausing at 14:13:42. Officer Hodges, do you see the yellow flag that says "Don't tread on me" in the video?
I do.
Over the course of the day on January 6th, did you see the mob holding up flags referencing American wars?
I did.
Which ones?
I saw the flag you just referenced, which I know to be the Gadsden flag. It's a Revolutionary War flag of the United States. And I saw Confederate battle flags referencing the United States Civil War.
Did any other flags stand out?
I saw flags advertising Trump for the presidential election of 2020, which at that point was over. I saw another flag in the video, crossed rifles, signifying the military willingness to violence.
Objection. Foundation.
You can,
Strike.
I will sustain the objection. You can ask him how he knows.
I'll move on, Your Honor. Officer Hodges, what, if any, Trump paraphernalia did you see among the crowd that day?
I saw lots of Trump paraphernalia, people wearing articles of clothing with Trump's name on them, Trump 2020 advertisements, flags and articles of clothing saying "God, Guns, Trump." Again, the "Stop the Steal" slogan was prevalent.
And what, if anything, did you hear the mob say about President Trump?
I heard them say "Fight for Trump." It was a chant. That was the most explicit one.
And Mr. Hain, could you play the video again? And, Your Honor, that's the complete video. At this time, we would move to admit Exhibit 13.
No objection.
13 is admitted.
Mr. Hain, could you pull up Exhibit 14 at timestamp 14:25:11? Officer Hodges, do you see the video on your screen?
I do.
Is this your body camera footage from January 6, 2021?
It is.
Did you review this footage prior to your testimony today?
I did.
Does the footage fairly and accurately depict the events of January 6, 2021 as you remember them?
It does.
Mr. Hain, please play the video.
Bandits, take off your bandits, take off your hands and show solidarity with we the people, or we're gonna run over you! We're gonna run over you! Do you think your little t-shirt guns are gonna stop this crowd? No! We're going into that building! Take off your badges, take off your guns! Jesus!
Officer Hodges, did you hear the man speaking in the video?
I did.
How did you interpret his statements at the time?
At the time, I interpreted his statements as an attempt to coerce us into joining their assault on the Capitol. He explicitly asks us to take off our badges and put down our weapons and join them. He says that if we don't, then they will run over us. He then references our guns, saying that, do you think those little pea shooters are going to stop us? This was particularly concerning to me, that it meant that he was willing to withstand lethal force that we might use, and in his efforts to achieve his objective.
Your Honor, at this time, we would move to admit Exhibit 14.
No objection.
Exhibit 14 is admitted.
Mr. Hain, please pull up Exhibit 15 at timestamp 14:28:45. Officer Hodges, do you see the video on your screen?
I do.
Is this your body camera footage from January 6, 2021?
It is.
Did you review this video prior to your testimony today?
I did.
Does the video fairly and accurately depict the events of January 6, 2021 as you recall them?
It does.
Mr. Hain, please play the video. We're stopping the video at 14:30:33. Officer Hodges, could you describe what we just saw?
The video depicts the police line in front of the U.S. Terrace. At the time, it was breached by the mob. The mob was able to breach the line. They pushed through us, and the sheer size and number of people involved made it impossible to get the line back where it was. They continued to assault us, push us back. We were beaten, pushed, kicked. I was overwhelmed by members of the mob, being pushed back by several at once until I was pushed back against that waist back high wall you see in the video. I was held there while one of the assailants attempted to gouge out my eye. And I was able to repel the attackers, and we were forced to retreat.
Officer Hodges, how did the assailant try to gouge out your eye?
He grabbed my face and stuck his thumb in my eye and pushed it in and tried to dig it out as best he could.
So the timestamp at the start of this video was around 2:28 p.m. Is that about when the time the mob started to surge?
That's correct.
Had you ever seen a crowd break through a police line like that before?
No.
To your knowledge, prior to this point, had the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department ever had to fall back from a police line because a crowd broke through it?
No.
Did you hear the man in the video say, "This is our house"?
I did.
What did you understand those words to mean?
Objection. Relevance.
Overruled.
Foundation as well.
You may testify as to what you understood it to mean.
At the time, I understood the assailants' words, "This is our house," to mean that they had the right to be there, or they believed they had the right to be there, that they had the right to enter whenever they wanted, and they had the right to decide what went on, and more pertinently, what did not go on inside the United States Capitol.
Over the course of the day, did you hear other individuals say, "This is our house"?
I did.
Your Honor, at this time, we would move to admit Exhibit 15.
No objection.
Exhibit 15 is admitted.
Mr. Hain, please pull up Exhibit 16, starting at timestamp 14:30:44, and pause the video. Officer Hodges, do you see the video on your screen?
I do.
Is this your body camera footage from January 6, 2021?
It is.
Did you review this footage prior to your testimony today?
I did.
Is this footage a fair and accurate depiction of the events of January 6, 2021, as you recall them?
It is.
Please play the video.
What are you doing? What are you guys doing?
Officer Hodges, could you describe what we just saw?
As we were retreating from the police line being broken on in front of the West Terrace, I observed a man who was on the ground and had a large knife on his belt. Other officers were attempting to disarm him of his knife, and I assisted while another officer took possession of the knife.
To your knowledge, was this man arrested at the scene?
No.
Why not?
As I previously testified, the current conditions that you see in the video made it untenable to make arrests. We could not guard him adequately with our manpower nor provide for his safety, security, and medical treatment.
Your Honor, at this time we would move to admit Exhibit 16.
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 16 is admitted.
Mr. Hain, please pull up Exhibit 17, starting at timestamp 14:32:15, and press pause. Officer Hodges, do you see the video on your screen?
Yes,
Is this your body camera footage from January 6, 2021?
it is.
Did you review this footage prior to your testimony today?
I did.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of the events of January 6, 2021, as you recall them?
It is.
Please play the video.
Thank you so much, Aaron.
Officer Hodges, just to orient us, can you describe where you started at the beginning of the video and then where you ended up?
At the beginning of the video, I was in front of the West Terrace. I ascended the stairs of the inaugural stage up to the West Terrace proper.
And looking at the timestamp currently showing on Exhibit 17, it says 14:13:11. So this is approximately 2:33 p.m. Is that right?
1433, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Correct.
And by this time, 2:33 p.m., were the police still in control of where you were standing on the West Terrace of the Capitol?
Yes.
Were the police able to maintain control of the West Terrace of the Capitol the rest of the day?
No.
Your Honor, at this time we would move to admit Exhibit 17.
No objection.
Exhibit 17 is admitted.
Mr. Hain, please pull up Exhibit 18, starting at timestamp 14:36:10. Officer Hodges, do you see the video on your screen?
I do.
Is this more of your body camera footage from January 6, 2021?
It is.
Did you review this footage prior to your testimony today?
I did.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of the events of January 6, 2021, as you recall them?
It is.
Please play the video. Let's pause the video at 14:37:06. Officer Hodges, just to orient us again, can you walk us through where you started at the beginning of the video and then where you ended up?
At the beginning of the video, I was on the West Terrace. I then entered the doorway and into the tunnel that connects the West Terrace to the room known as the crypt.
And who was coughing in the video?
That was me.
Why were you coughing?
I was experiencing the effects of CS gas or tear gas in the air.
Your Honor, at this time we would move to admit Exhibit 18.
No objection.
Admitted.
Mr. Hain, please pull up Exhibit 19, starting at timestamp 19:54:38. Officer Hodges, do you see the video on your screen?
Yes.
Is this more of your body camera footage from January 6, 2021?
Yes.
Did you review this video prior to your testimony today?
I did.
Is this a fair and accurate depiction of the events of January 6, 2021, as you recall them?
Yes.
Could you tell us where you're located at this point in the video? Oh, I'm sorry, Your Honor. Could we please play the video? Now, Officer Hodges, could you tell us where you're located at this point in the video?
At this point in the video, I am in the tunnel that connects the West Terrace to the crypt.
So you were on the other side of the tunnel that you had previously seen walking through in the prior video?
Correct.
And can you describe what was happening in the video?
In the video, we are forming a line inside the tunnel, attempting to defend that entrance from the mob.
And could you describe the scene inside of that tunnel?
The scene inside the tunnel was a sensory overload. It was chaotic. It was extremely loud. There was alarms going off. Lots of people yelling. There were chemical munitions in the air, strobe lights, and intense body-to-body contact. We, as you got closer to where the assailants in the police line was, the more compressed everyone got until it was a lot of pressure being exerted on you.
By this point in the day, around 2:55 p.m., had the mob taken control of the West Terrace of the Capitol?
Yes.
What was your belief of what would happen if the mob broke through that police line in that tunnel?
At the time, we had no idea if the mob was able to gain entry into the Capitol building through any other means. We believed that if they were to defeat our line in the tunnel, they would have unfettered access to the Capitol itself and make good on all their threats.
Threats against whom?
Congress, Vice President.
Did you hear the officers in the video say interlock the shields?
Yes.
And what does that mean?
Some of our police shields are designed by their shape to be able to interlock with each other when placed next to each other in a certain way. This allows them to function as a single shield and thus eliminates the vulnerability of having two individual shields as individual pieces of equipment.
Prior to January 6, 2021, had you ever used that interlocking shield function?
I have not.
At this time, Your Honor, we move to admit Exhibit 19.
No objection.
Exhibit 19 is admitted. Officer Rogers, could you just explain for the court exactly, like, I'm not sure I understand this tunnel, like, a tunnel from where to where, and yeah.
It's commonly referred to as the tunnel, but it's a hallway. It just connects the outside, the terrace where I was, to the inside of the Capitol itself. It's a hallway.
In my mind, it was some sort of underground tunnel, so.
Mr. Hain, please pull up Exhibit 20 and pause the video. Officer Hodges, do you see the video on your screen?
I do.
And what does this video show?
This video shows the inside of the tunnel connecting the West Terrace to the crypt. Well, we were defending it from the mob who was trying to gain entry to the Capitol.
Did you review this video prior to your testimony today?
I did.
And is it a fair and accurate depiction of the events from January 6, 2021, as you remember them?
It is.
Please play the video.
Don't tell me what's good over there. Just go home, okay? You see me. Just go home. Everybody can go home.
Officer Hodges, can you describe what we just saw?
The video depicts the time in which I moved to the front of the police line inside the tunnel connecting the West Terrace to the crypt. And when I was attempting to repel the attackers, I had positioned myself in front of a metal rigid door frame in an attempt to use it to support my efforts to push forward. Unfortunately, at that time, the momentum had shifted, and our assailants had me pushed back and pinned me against the door frame with a police shield. At that time, one of my assailants took advantage of my vulnerability, grabbing my gas mask on my face, pushing and pulling rapidly, effectively punching me in the face several times, and then ripping it off my head. He was able to, at the time, my arms were pinned to my sides. I was effectively defenseless. With this in mind, he was able to rip away my right baton and then strike me in the head with it. At that point, I was experiencing all the effects of the day, various assaults, the head trauma I just endured, chemical irritants, and crushing pressure from the crowd. And my second field, my senses diminishing. I was still trapped though, so I did the only thing I could do, call for help. Fortunately, other officers were able to extricate me from my position, and I fell back to the rear of the tunnel.
Did you hear the mob shouting, "Heave ho"?
I did.
What was your understanding of what they were doing?
The mob shouting "Heave ho" I understood to be them coordinating their efforts in order to break through our defensive line. They were synchronizing their movement to multiply the force that applied and use their bodies to break through our line and gain access to the Capitol.
Now, the body camera video we previously watched, Exhibit 19, showed you in the tunnel around 2:55 p.m., according to the timestamp on that video. Is that right?
That's correct.
Approximately how long after 2:55 p.m. Did the events shown in this video, Exhibit 20, take place?
Approximately 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, so around 3:05 or 3:10?
That's correct.
Your Honor, at this time we would move to admit Exhibit 20.
No objection.
Admitted.
Officer Hodges, how long did you remain in the tunnel after 3:10?
I did not remain in the tunnel for very long at that point. I fell back to the crypt to convalesce as best I could. However, the fight was still ongoing, and we needed every body we had in the defense of the Capitol. So I went back out there. I no longer had my gas mask and a lot of my equipment. I was afraid I would be a liability in the tunnel. So I ascended a stair nearby back out to the West Terrace and joined a police line that was there. I remained on that line until reinforcements started to arrive from outside agencies, at which point I returned to the crypt and waited there.
Mr. Hain, could you please pull down the video? Officer Hodges, when you left the tunnel, did you still have your body camera on you?
I did not.
What happened to it?
It either fell off or was ripped off my chest where it was mounted and fell to the ground where it remained until another officer found it the following day.
And did you retrieve it at some point from that officer?
Through my agency, it returned to my possession, yes.
And so what did you do for the remainder of the day after you left the crypt?
Back in the crypt, I waited while members of my platoon gradually gathered, and we waited until we were all assembled, at which point we stood by, waiting for further orders. We stayed there until around midnight, at which point we were told that we were able to clear the Capitol. We left the Capitol grounds. Those who needed immediate medical attention went to hospitals. Those of us who did not were still on duty. We reported to downtown and and awaited further orders. I believe at about 1 a.m., eventually we were told we could go home. And we went back to our district from there and then went our separate ways.
How would you characterize the events you witnessed on January 6, 2021?
The events on January 6, 2021 at the United States Capitol were horrific. It was a terrorist attack on the United States of America, an assault on democracy, and an attempt to prevent the peaceful transfer of power.
About how many protest events have you worked as a member of the Civil Disturbance Unit?
Dozens.
How did the events of January 6, 2021 compare to those other experiences you've had as a member of the CDU?
The events of January 6th are incomparable to any other riots or protests or First Amendment assemblies I have policed. There is just no comparison in the level of violence and stakes.
And what were you fighting for on January 6th?
On January 6th, I was fighting for
Objection, relevance.
Overruled.
On January 6th, I was fighting for democracy. I was fighting for the safety and well-being of the members of Congress, the Vice President, the congressional staff who were in the building that day. I was fighting for myself, for my colleagues, and everyone who participates in our democracy.
Thank you, Officer Hodges. No further questions.
Cross-examination.
I may want that a little later, but not yet. Officer Hodges, there were multiple demonstrations.
Mr. Shaw, can you move the microphone here taller so we can
Sure.
make sure you're speaking into it?
Sure thing. Is that better? Officer Hodges, how many demonstrations were there in Washington, D.C. on January 6th?
I'm only aware of what transpired at the Capitol and the one at the Ellipse.
Okay. Are you aware that there were people who spoke at the Supreme Court?
No.
Are you aware that there were people who spoke at other venues in Washington, D.C. that day?
No.
Are you aware that there were protesters who did not attend any of the events where people spoke?
No.
You said that you thought there were, based on your view of the crowd that day, there were at least thousands of people present. Is that correct?
Correct.
How many people attended demonstrations in Washington, D.C. overall that day?
I don't have an exact number.
Okay. Have you heard any estimates of the number who were in attendance at various demonstrations that day?
At the Capitol, I heard, or I've read of a number around 9,400.
Okay. Have you heard an overall number in excess of 120,000?
No.
Is it your position that all of the people who attended demonstrations in Washington, D.C. that day were members of what you called the mob?
If there are demonstrations that were not part of the assault on the Capitol, then no.
So the mob, if I understand you correctly, you're defining as just the subset of people who assaulted the Capitol?
Correct.
And as you sit here today, are you able to tell me what percentage of what you call the mob attended President Trump's speech at the Ellipse?
No.
Are you able to tell me what percentage of what you call the mob listened to President Trump's speech at the Ellipse?
No.
Now, several times you said the mob did this, the mob said this, I saw the mob do this, or words to that effect. You remember that?
Yes.
Fair to say what you're really saying was, I saw individuals in what I call the mob do this or say this, correct?
A mob is composed of individuals, so yes.
Okay. And there were other people who were standing there who did not do or say those things, right?
That's correct.
And some portion of the people who were standing there were there and did not physically assault anybody, right?
I did not, there were times where I observed people and they were not assaulting anyone, correct?
And there were other demonstrators in Washington, D.C. that day who did not form part of the mob as you define it, correct?
I'm only aware of what transpired at the Ellipse and at the Capitol.
Okay. Now, fair to say that you are not able to read minds, right?
That is fair to say.
And just by looking at someone who was there that day, you weren't able to tell if that person attended the speech at the Ellipse, correct?
That's correct.
Or if that person had heard the speech, right?
Correct.
Or for that matter, if that person had ever read a tweet by President Trump, correct?
Correct.
Would you put up Exhibit 14, please? And just pause it right at the very beginning. Whoever was working the... Yeah, okay, great. Joanna's doing it, okay. So, for example, if we look at this picture, you can't tell whether this woman on the left in the striped shirt, you can't tell whether she attended the speech on the Ellipse, correct?
I cannot tell that by looking at her.
Or in any other way, right?
Correct.
And the man behind her who a few moments later was going to yell at you, you can't tell whether he attended that speech, right?
Correct.
Or any of the other people in that picture, right?
Correct.
Or in fact, any of the other people in any of the other film exhibits that we saw earlier today, right?
I cannot identify individuals who attended the speech and then were at the Capitol.
Or who read any of President Trump's tweets, correct?
Correct.
And I wanted to clear up a couple of things that just wasn't clear about from your testimony. At one point you said that and I forget the exact name of it, but you said there was a gun unit.
Gun recovery unit?
Gun recovery unit, that's it, thank you. And you said, I believe, that they identified people who either had weapons or who they thought might have weapons. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know how many people have been prosecuted for firearms crimes arising out of the January 6th demonstration?
No.
Would it surprise you to learn that it is a total of 5?
No.
Okay. And that one of those people arrived on January 7th in Washington, D.C.? So it was really 4 on January 6th?
Okay.
And do you know how many people how many demonstrators discharged a firearm in Washington, D.C. on January 6th?
I do not know.
Would it surprise you to learn it was 0?
No.
And then I believe you said that you thought you had suffered a concussion. Is that correct? Because you had a headache for 2 weeks?
That's correct.
Okay. Were you diagnosed with a concussion by a medical professional?
I went to the police and fire clinic, and they sent me to Washington Hospital Center, which is a hospital in Washington, D.C., received MRI, and I wasn't diagnosed with a concussion, but that they asked me if I wanted to do any further tests for that, and I said no, because if I was or wasn't, the course of treatment was the same.
I have no further questions for you, sir. Thank you.
Any questions from the Colorado Republican Party?
No question.
Any questions from Secretary Griswold?
No question, Your Honor.
Any redirect?
Brief redirect, Your Honor.
Okay.
Officer Hodges, you testified that you were initially stationed on Constitution Avenue, is that right?
That's
On-
correct.
On January 6th?
Yes,
And that was between the hours of 7 a.m. and 1:30 p.m., is that accurate?
that's accurate.
And during that time, did you observe the crowd walking, or your testimony earlier today was that you observed the crowd walking from the Ellipse area to the Capitol, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, no further questions, Your Honor.
Officer Hodges, thank you so much for your testimony and your service to this country.
Yes, Your Honor.
Next witness.
Your Honor, our next witness is remote, and so it might just take about 1 minute. I think they're all ready. We just have to let them in, and it will now be under Congressman Eric Swalwell. Do you need something? Okay. Why don't you? Here. How do I see him? I don't see him. Is he logged in yet? I think so. Your Honor, the petitioner is called Congressman Eric Swalwell. Okay. Is he? Okay, he's coming right now. Sorry for the delay. Here he is, Your Honor. Thank you, Congressman Swalwell. Just one moment while we get the tech set up. There we go. Okay. Good afternoon. Congressman, can you please introduce yourself?
I need to swear him in.
Oh, sorry. Oh,
I'm fumbling
Yeah.
with the technology.
well, and we have a siren again.
Congressman Swalwell, can you hear us?
Yes, Your Honor.
Great. Will you please raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear, under the penalty of law, that the testimony you will give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Good afternoon, Congressman Swalwell. Could you please introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Eric Swalwell, and I represent the 14th Congressional District of California.
How long have you been a member of Congress?
Going on 11 years, elected in 2012 and sworn in on January 3, 2013.
Your Honor, yeah.
We got it. Were you at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, 2021?
Yes, it was.
And what was supposed to happen in Congress that day?
We were sworn in 3 days earlier, and on the 6th was to be the day where the Congress votes to certify the electoral college votes that were sent from December after being ratified by the states.
I'm going to ask you some more questions about January 6th, 2021, but first I'd like to ask you some questions about prior presidential elections. When, if ever, had you participated in Congress's counting of electoral votes for president before January 6th, 2021?
I have also participated in the January 6th, 2013 certification for the re-election of President Barack Obama. And I also participated on January 6th, 2017 for the election of President Donald Trump.
And does Congress always count the votes on January 6th?
Yes, every 4 years on January 6th. Again, new Congress sworn in on the 3rd, and then on the 6th is when the certification occurs.
In your experience, what is the process for counting and certification of electoral votes on January 6th?
Largely ceremonial, in that the Congress convenes in what's called a joint session, meaning the House and the Senate are in the Congress. The Vice President of the United States, the President of the Senate, presides over the count, and each state alphabetically has their votes called. If there's an objection, you need somebody to meet your objection from the other chamber. So, for example, if a House member objects, a senator would also have to object, and then both bodies would go back to their chambers and debate the objection, and then come back for resuming the count.
And how are those objections resolved?
They're resolved through debate and then a vote.
And I think you testified about this, but what role does the vice president play in those proceedings generally?
As a president of the Senate, the vice president presides over the count. There are tellers who are seated just below the vice president from both chambers, both parties. They tally the counts that are sent from the states, and the vice president literally, kind of like an award show, opens up the count and reads how the state went for each individual.
In 2016, were there objections to the counting and certification of electoral votes from any state?
Do you mean in 2017?
Yes, I'm sorry, arising out of the 2016 election, so on January 6, 2017.
I do recall there was at least one, perhaps more Democratic House objections, but I also recall that there was no senator to sign off, so to speak, or co-sign on the objection, and so we never adjourned for debate.
And so what happened with those objections?
I remember Vice President Biden was in the chamber, and Vice President Biden asked if there was a senator who also objected. No senator objected, and the Vice President would open up the envelope or look at the votes set for the state, and they would just alphabetically proceed to the next state.
And did you object to the counting or certification of any electoral votes?
Not in 2013 and not in 2017, no.
Do you recall any of the objectors in 2017, on January 6, 2017, suggesting that then Vice President Biden, as President of the Senate, could have rejected any of the electoral votes submitted by the states?
No, I do not recall that ever coming up in any caucus meetings or any public representations.
And what do you recall, if anything, about anyone suggesting that then Vice President Biden, as President of the Senate, could declare Hillary Clinton the winner of the 2016 election?
In my recollection, that was never discussed by any of my House colleagues.
Before late 2020 or early 2021, had you ever heard anyone suggest that the Vice President, as President of the Senate, had discretion to reject electoral votes from states?
I would not hear that line of argument until after the 2020 election from the former President Donald Trump and his team.
And did then Vice President Biden try to do any of those things during the counting and certifying of the 2016 presidential election?
He did not. If there was not a senator to match a House member's objection, he moved on with the count.
Do you recall any candidate or colleague suggesting that Congress should ignore the Constitution and certify the election for the winner of the 2016 popular vote?
I don't recall that ever happening.
And did any person supporting any candidate for president, to your knowledge, attack the Capitol on January 6th, 2017?
That definitely did not happen on January 6th, 2017.
And are you aware of anyone ever attacking the Capitol during Congress's counting and certification of presidential electoral votes in the history of our country prior to January 6, 2021?
Certainly not in my lifetime and not any knowledge I have of the Congress's history.
I now want to turn to the 2020 election. Did you have any concerns in the weeks and months leading up to the 2020 presidential election about whether Mr. Trump would accept the results of the election if he lost?
I did, and that was the evening of the election when a statement was made by the president early in the morning, essentially, or not essentially, he was saying that the election was rigged, and then, and to be honest, prior to the election, the president would not honor reporters' requests to accept the outcome of the election if he lost. And then, of course, on the night of the election, he had said in his first public statement that he believed it was rigged. And then in the weeks after, the media declared Joe Biden as the president-elect, and the states certified the election outcomes, and the lawsuits that the president has even brought had all been dismissed in the courts. The president ramped up his rhetoric in public appearances and on Twitter. And one that I recall was an invitation in mid-December via Twitter for people to come to the Capitol on January 6th, and stating in the tweet, "Will be wild."
You testified just there that there were legal challenges that you were aware of brought by Mr. Trump to the 2020 election. By December 14th, 2020, are you aware of what the status of those legal challenges was?
By December 14th, that, if I recall, is the date where the states were certifying their counts every challenge to the state's counting in doing their certification had been dismissed or dropped by presidents.
Following the state's certification of electoral votes on December 14th, 2020, what was your understanding as to whether Mr. Trump had any further legal avenues to challenge the 2020 election?
In my understanding was the next step in the process was the January 6th certification and then the January 20 inauguration for President-elect Biden. That was it. They had been exhausted.
Let's turn now to January 6th, 2021. What was your role in the counting and certification process on January 6th, 2021?
I was folded in for by Speaker Pelosi that she would like me to preside as the speaker designate at noon on January 6th to gavel us in, so to speak. And so the day starts, every congressional day starts with the speaker gaveling the Congress in. And so I gaveled us in, led us in pledge of allegiance. There was a new chaplain to the Congress, and asked the chaplain, as we do every opening session, asked the chaplain to lead us in prayer. And then I read an appointment of the tellers that each side, that each party, each chamber had designated to participate in the count on January 6th. And then I adjourned, and all of that lasted no more than 10 minutes.
I'm going to back you up just briefly. What did you do that morning before the certification process began?
I ran from the residence I have in Washington, D.C. to the Capitol and then back. It's a run I do often. And I recall on the run back from the Capitol, actually running up North Capitol, seeing dozens of individuals carrying signs that read "Stop the Steal" and wearing body armor and military fatigues. And I remember pulling down the cap that I was wearing. It was pretty cold, so kind of pulling it over my face because I didn't want to be seen by this crowd or recognized by this crowd. But it certainly just gave me an unsettling feeling about the direction the day was headed.
Did you watch any of Mr. Trump's speech on the ellipse that day?
I did. Once I returned to the Capitol, and after I opened the session, I was on the floor with my Democratic colleagues, and many of us had our phones out, and we were watching the speech on the floor. We would step off the floor into this area called a cloakroom, which is just footsteps from the floor, and there were televisions on in the cloakroom playing the speech from the president and his supporters at the ellipse.
And what was your reaction to that speech or the parts that you saw of it?
Well, in the weeks before January 6th, the president had fired up his supporters with claims that the election was rigged, said the 6th was going to be wild, and it came together on the 6th, just from what I saw of individuals on the streets of Washington, and then what I saw in the speech, it appeared that an angry mob had assembled around the Capitol and near the White House. And when the president said that his supporters must fight like hell and they won't have a country anymore, that worried me because we were undergoing the process certifying the election he lost. And when he aimed them at the Capitol by saying that he was in solidarity going to the Capitol with them, that we're going to go to the Capitol, a lot of us in the cloakroom looked at each other in a, oh God, like, what does this mean for us kind of feeling.
So how did the counting and certification of electoral votes on January 6, 2021 go?
So after I recessed, we took a break for about 50 minutes, and then Speaker Pelosi and Vice President Pence, as the President of the Senate, would next reconvene the House and the Senate in the House chamber. And as I said, it begins alphabetically. So on the Democratic side, because of COVID, only members of leadership and members from the states that were going to have to defend the vote were on the House floor. Any other Democrat would have to watch in the gallery. So there were no more than 24 or so of myself and others on the House floor. And I should have added, at that time I was a member of House leadership. And so Arizona was, the first state to be challenged. And if I recall, Congressman Paul Gosar from Arizona challenged the Arizona vote. The vice president asked if there was a senator who would co-sign the challenge, and I believe it was Senator Cruz from Texas who signed off. And so we adjourned the joint session, meaning the senators left to go to their own chamber for debate. We stayed in our chamber, and Speaker Pelosi took the gavel to kick off the debate on the matter of Arizona.
At some point thereafter, you learned that rioters had breached the Capitol, correct?
Myself and everyone around us on the floor had our phones out and were watching intently on what was happening around the Capitol. We were also receiving a number of Capitol Police alerts. There's an internal email system for members and staff, and the alerts were telling us about the mob that was assembling around the Capitol office buildings that were closed, suspected pipe bombs around the Capitol that had been discovered. And so we were focused on the debate, but also security posture, whether it was watching Twitter or receiving the Capitol police alerts, was also right in front of us in our handheld devices.
And about what time was this happening?
This was between 1 and 2 o'clock. As we watched either people who were in the mob and staged at the Capitol during the stage, or people who were at the ellipse and moved toward the Capitol after the speech.
What was the first thing that occurred that was unusual to you inside the Capitol?
Well, first, I would say watching the mob on our devices, a road passed with force, various security perimeters, was unusual. We've never seen anything like that before. But also on the floor, Speaker Pelosi was presiding in the House chamber, and abruptly she was asked to step off the podium, and her security detail took her off the floor. And I also noticed Mr. Hoyer, who was the majority leader, Steny Hoyer of Maryland, and James Clyburn of South Carolina, who was the majority whip, also their details hurriedly went to them and took them off the floor.
And about what time was that?
This was in the 1 o'clock, let's say mid 1 o'clock hour. And at that point, James McGovern, who was a Rules Committee chairman from Massachusetts, he stepped up to the podium, and so it was a seamless transition. The debate did not stop. He stepped up to the podium and presided over the debate on the matter of Arizona.
After Speaker Pelosi and the other members of leadership that you mentioned were moved out of the chamber, you said debate continued for about how long did debate continue?
For probably another, no more than 30 more minutes. And it may have been even fewer.
What happened next in terms of safety recommendations?
Mr. McGovern suspended debate, and a Capitol Police officer went to the podium. I remember it being the lower podium, so the podium where the speaker presides. There's two podiums in what's called the rostrum. The upper podium is where the speaker presides. That's where I got to sit. That's where Speaker Pelosi has presided. That's where McGovern presided. The lower podium, if you think about the State of the Union, is where the president speaks. So a security officer went to that lower podium and told the members that there were people unauthorized inside the building, and that Capitol Police was dispersing tear gas and that we were to reach under our seats and pull out a gas mask and be ready to put it on in case they had to disperse tear gas inside the chamber, and also be ready to move through an evacuation room.
Had you ever had to put a gas mask on in the Capitol House chamber before?
I didn't, until that moment, I did not know that there were gas masks under our seats, and we had also never before, rehearsed any type of scenario. So first, there is just, I think people were surprised that they were even there. Sit up off them every day, we just didn't know.
Who were you sitting with at that time?
I had moved from sitting with Barbara Lee and Sherry Bustos early in the debate over to Congressman Ruben Gallego of Arizona. His wife had reached out to me. She was worried that Ruben would probably not follow orders of the Capitol Police, and that he would want to fight the mob or the protesters. And so she asked me if I could just look out for Ruben. And so I went over and sat with Ruben Gallego.
And what can you tell us about Congressman Gallego's training?
So I knew, and most of our colleagues knew, that Ruben had served a combat mission as a Marine in the Iraq War. And so as we were pulling out the gas masks, he saw immediately that I had no idea how to use or even open the gas mask. And so he started having women first throw him or toss him their gas masks. And he was ripping them open, sometimes using his teeth to rip them open, and was just handing out the gas masks and telling people to not breathe too quickly because that could lead you to pass out. He and I agreed that we would take off our coats so that our congressional pins were not obvious if we had to move to any of the rioters, and also so that we had more freedom of movement. He also handed me a pen that was sitting on the table where he was prepared to debate for Arizona, and he said to me as he handed the pen, he said, if any of them get near you, just put this in their neck.
So what was going through your mind at that moment?
A lot of uncertainty, disbelief that this was happening, that we were taking our coats off, that we were looking for weapons or how to use gas masks. At that point, as we're waiting for the security officer to give us further instructions, the chaplain who I had asked to lead us in the prayer earlier in the day went back up to the podium and uninvited, unannounced, just started reading from that lower podium a prayer, and then she asked all of us if we would pray with her.
What, if anything, did you notice being done to secure the chamber at that time?
So after I and my colleagues prayed, I noticed that Capitol police officers were, along with some of my Republican members, Republican colleagues were pushing furniture against the back door. So if you think of it, again, the State of the Union is probably the best way to orient yourself. The door that the president walks through to the State of the Union, that's the back of the chamber. Those double doors have glass panes on them. And so furniture was being moved to block those doors because we could hear the pounding on those doors and the shouting of the rioters outside. In the front of the chamber where the rostrum is, where the podiums are, the speakers, there's two massive portraits. There's the portrait of George Washington, and that's on the Democratic side, and there's a portrait of General set of double doors that takes you off the floor, and they're glass doors, so I could see through the glass doors in what's called a speaker's lobby that Capitol Police were stacking furniture and chairs against the doors that lead into the speaker's lobby. They were stacking them as high as they could stack them with what they had. We would be sat, as I said, and waited for instructions on the evacuation.
How would you characterize the group of people gathered outside the speaker's lobby and the House chamber at that time?
I could mostly just hear the sounds, the banging over the screen. I would not see that in the store.
And how would you characterize those sounds? What did it sound like?
It was prompting, and I say that because the chamber is mostly windowless, and so just having been alerted on our phones that suspected bombs were found around the building, and watching the violence against the police officers, and seeing that the mob had reached multiple perimeters and had come closer to the chamber, it was really just the uncertainty of what they wanted or what they would do.
How concerned were you for your personal safety at that moment?
It was escalating as we went from gas masks to a pen in my hand to a prayer from the chaplain, and it was when the chaplain read that prayer that I finally texted my wife, something I did not want to text her. I had essentially been telling her, we're going to be fine, it's okay, I didn't want to worry throughout the morning.
During the attack on the Capitol, were you following Mr. Trump's tweets?
I was. As I said, almost all of my colleagues, we had our phones out, and we were reading our phones and following the tweets and the ellipse speeches and listening to the paper.
And why were you following his tweets?
We connected the president's tweets to our own safety in the chamber, and also the integrity of the proceedings that were taking place.
I'm going to ask for Exhibit 148 to be displayed, please. And Your Honor, this exhibit has been stipulated by all sides. This is one of Mr. Trump's tweets.
Okay, are you offering it into it?
I am offering it into evidence, Exhibit 148, Your Honor. And this is a long exhibit, so we're only going to look at 2 tweets of the whole compilation. So this tweet is on page 83, and it has a timestamp of 2:24 p.m. on January 6th, 2021.
Okay, Exhibit 148 is admitted.
Congressman Swalwell, can you see the exhibit on your screen?
Yes, I see the tweet from the verified account of the former president.
And do you remember reading this tweet while you were in the chamber?
Yes, we received the timestamp request, what I recall. It was a time that I recall being still on the floor, which is 2:24 p.m. on the 6th.
And how did you interpret this tweet? What did you interpret it to mean?
I interpreted that the president believed that the vice president was refusing to do something that could overturn the outcome the president wanted. But again, for my personal safety and the proceedings we were engaged in, the colleagues that I was with, we interpreted this target had been painted on the Capitol, because that's where the vice president was when the tweet was sent.
And can you read the tweet, Congressman?
Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done to protect our country and our Constitution, giving states a chance to certify a corrected set of facts, not the fraudulent or inaccurate ones which they were asked to previously certify. USA demands the truth! Exclamation
Did you notice any change in what was happening outside the chamber after this tweet occurred, was sent?
Well, we didn't feel more safe. Like it wasn't as if, the mob subsided. We were continuing to be updated by accounts. They were trying to secure an evacuation path. We should stand ready. The shouting continued.
Representative Salvo, could you just speak up a teeny bit? So
Sure.
you're starting to trail just a little bit.
Yeah, I'm happy to repeat that too. But
If you wouldn't mind.
sure. When the tweet was sent, we did not feel more safe. It wasn't as if the mob subsided. And so we waited, and this was near the point where we would ultimately leave the floor. But you could still hear the sounds of the pounding outside of the chamber and the screaming of.
When, at some point, you were led out of the chamber, is that correct?
Yes,
And-
and the security officer went to that lower podium and told us there was an evacuation crew and that we were to go in the direction of the Lafayette portrait. Again, two sides. One is Washington, that's where they were stacking chairs. The other was the Lafayette portrait. And so we were told to go in that direction.
I think it's them. It is. But the whole WebEx went down. Sorry, Your Honor, small tech issue. Did the entire WebEx go down? Okay,
WebEx seems to still be on.
okay.
Congressman Swallow, we're just having a technical problem.
No problem.
Okay. Should I wait?
Let's maybe in a minute.
Yeah.
If it doesn't get fixed in a minute, you can still hear it. So.
Okay. First one was 83, and the next one's on 84, and it's 6:01 p.m.
Mr. Chairman, let's just, I just want to make sure that the court reporter could continue. She couldn't see him for lip reading, but she says she can, so why don't we continue while they work on the technical issue?
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. Congressman Swalwell, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I just can't hear him.
Oh, can you say something, Mr. Swalwell?
Yes, I'm unmuted now.
Okay.
It doesn't allow me on my end.
Okay.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, hopefully we'll be back to visual in just a moment. Did you play a role in the evacuation of the chamber?
Well, no, the brave police officers were the ones who asked us to leave. Being a rule follower, the son of a cop, I immediately started to follow the police officers as we were asked to leave. But I did see my colleague Ruben Gallego, who is not a rule follower, did not follow the orders of the police. And I saw that he was standing on house chairs, yelling at the members in the gallery that they were going to be okay, and just reminding them about their gas masks. And so I went back to the Washington side of the chamber, the Washington corporate side, and started yelling, Ruben, time to go, we gotta go. And was ultimately able to get Ruben to walk out of the chamber with him.
And what path did you take during the evacuation?
So we went out of the doors near the Lafayette portrait, which is the Republican side of the chamber. And there's a long hallway that those doors lead into. It's called the Speaker's Lobby. In a non-COVID time, that's where the press corps assembled and interviewed members. There were no press at the time because of COVID restrictions. And so I went out that door and then down the stairway that was just off that exit.
When you were starting to leave, did you notice that was there anybody still in the chamber?
There were still police officers in the chamber. And as I said, if I recall, there were one or two Republican colleagues who were standing at the double doors at the back of the chamber, helping push the furniture against the doors. But Gallego was one of the last ones on the floor, and so I finally pulled him out. And as we were leaving, I looked down the long hallway of the speaker's lobby at where they had stacked the chairs and saw the mob pressed up against the glass doors that lead into the mall.
When you were leaving the chamber, were there any people left in the gallery?
Unfortunately, the gallery colleagues of mine were not able to leave at the same time that we were. I did look up at the gallery a number of times, especially when we were with Congressman Gallego was yelling at them. Many of them were lying under the chairs of the gallery. Some of them had their gas masks on. Some of them looked like they were in kind of like a prayer group, praying together. But the Capitol Police later learned the impeachment had not yet secured the exit for the third floor doors.
Okay. And what was your reaction to seeing those members and staff in the gallery?
Horrified. We felt helpless that the police were not able to get them out, and frankly felt guilt that I was able to leave and they were still up there.
You testified a moment ago that the path you took led you through the speaker's lobby. How long did you stay in the speaker's lobby?
We were encouraged to move as quickly as we could, but I learned you can only move as fast as the people in front of you, and with hundreds of members leaving the floor, there were fits and starts, and so we would move and we would stop and cluster, and the evacuation route would last, I recall, well over 10 to 15 minutes to get us in.
Did you hear anything as you exited the chamber?
As I was leaving the chamber and going through the speaker's lobby, I did hear what sounded like a gunshot. I did not see it, and I was in the mix of members who were
And when did you ultimately make it to a safe location?
It took, as I said, at least 10 to 15 minutes, and so I would say sometime just before 3 o'clock or near 3 o'clock.
Who else from Congress did you meet up with there?
House leadership had been taken off the floor when Speaker Pelosi was taken off the floor. So anyone who remained on the floor was members of Democratic leadership, members from states that were defending their vote, and then most of my Republican colleagues. It didn't appear that they had the same COVID restrictions that we had on our side. And so that was the group that moved together off the floor. Eventually, in the evacuation room, our colleagues from the gallery would join us, members of the press corps would join us, and then members of leadership staff who worked in offices in the Capitol would join us.
Once you were in that location, were you receiving updates as to what was going on in the Capitol and outside?
The Sergeant of Arms, who is the individual charged with House security, moved with us and was in the room when we arrived. And so he routinely gave us updates, and he, frankly, like being on a delayed flight with the Capitol, probably the same thing every 15 minutes, which was that the Capitol was under attack. They were trying to get more resources to clear the Capitol, but we would have to stay there until the Capitol was cleared. And that was every 15 to 20 minutes.
Was there communication in that location between you and your colleagues about what was happening outside?
Certainly, yes. It was Republicans and Democrats, in the same room. And at one point, I do recall that the Sergeant of Arms had kind of loosely implied that they may be bringing buses to the site, and that we would leave in buses. And I was seated next to, for most of the time, next to Congressman Adam Schiff. And I do remember Mr. Schiff vocalizing that we should not leave, we should stay, and that essentially the worst thing we could do, if there's an attempted coup taking place, is to leave the site of the coup, that we needed to go back to the Capitol and finish the count.
I'm going to now show.
I also recall, sorry,
Nope.
Ruben Gallego also, because I remember asking Gallego should we consider the buses, and Gallego was asked that I remember the phrase that we would be sitting ducks if we got on the bus and left. That would be the worst thing for us, for our presidency.
At some point that afternoon, are you aware that Mr. Trump made a statement?
Yes, and I remember multiple statements and the video, but yes.
And I'm going to have Mr. Heim bring up exhibit number P68. Your Honor, this is also a stipulated exhibit.
68 submitted.
And do you remember seeing this video, Congressman Swalwell?
Yes, I do.
Can you play the video, Mr. Heim? It indicates there's an issue with the WebEx audio.
Mr. Reedy, how much longer do you have with them? Maybe we should break for lunch and people can figure out the technology.
I've probably got about another 10 or 15 minutes.
I mean, I was hoping to get through direct before lunch, but I'm worried that the technology issue might take some figuring out.
Okay, that's fine, Your Honor.
And it may be that it's not possible to play the video over WebEx with sound, so hopefully your tech people can talk to the court's tech people and we'll figure something out.
I can also have the video played locally for Congressman Swalwell, because everybody here can see the video, I think. So maybe that's an option too.
Okay, why don't we figure that out, because I'd like to see the video.
Okay, yeah. And it's only 1 minute. It's a short
Okay.
video.
Let's take a break. We will reconvene at 1:15, and hopefully somebody in your team can have Alan and IT people here and figure it out.
We'll work very hard to do that. Thank you, Your Honor.